Happy Halloween, everyone. I'm just out here in the garage trying to get my 59 here ready for storage. So I put a little stable in the tank. I think I got probably about, I don't know, 6 gallons of gas in there or something. So I put enough stable in there to keep that fresh over the winter time. The next step is to start it up and let it run for a little bit and get some of the gas into the engine and burn off the stuff that doesn't have stable in it. But that's not why I have you guys, or that's not why I'm doing this video today. I figure since Halloween is coming up real fast, I should do a little Halloween special for you guys. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of tell you the story about how this car earned the name Evil Stew. Or, you know, we were calling it I was calling it the Devil Hawk at first, but I don't know, Evil Stew just kind of stuck to it. So this is going to be kind of a storytelling time, and I'm going to talk about why this car is haunted. So I actually bought this thing back in the year 2000. I was in a pretty horrific apartment fire that year, and I had just gotten out of the hospital, and I had some pretty bad post-traumatic stress disorder and some really bad anxiety and depression issues. And I wanted to find an old car to restore to kind of keep my mind off of what had happened, and, you know, and maybe I could fix it up as I kind of fixed myself up mentally. So I started looking for like a Mustang or a T-Bird or something. And I ended up finding this thing in the Auto Trader in South Dakota. And I immediately called the guy because I always liked these. I always thought they were cool as hell. So I immediately called the guy and we scheduled a time to go look at it. So I drove all the way to South Dakota and took a look at the car, which was pretty disappointing because the guy told me that this thing was in really good condition, really good restorable condition. And after driving like 6 hours and seeing the car, I was pretty disappointed because it was way rougher than he had explained. And it didn't have a title. I don't think it ran. There's no belt on the engine. There's no way I could turn it over without the belt because, I mean, I didn't know how to turn it otherwise. So I wasn't actually sure if I wanted the car after seeing it. I mean, it was in way worse condition than I thought it was going to be. And the whole situation of driving out there, meeting this guy, who is really eccentric, by the way, who owned this car, just kind of, I don't know if I just didn't have enough sleep that day or something, but it just, in my mind, wasn't going very well. I was kind of weirded out by the whole situation, especially because the car itself was kind of giving me the creeps. I mean, when I approached it for the first time, I swear to God, I smelled something like dead or rotting in the vicinity of the vehicle. The owner, we'll just call him Mike. Mike didn't notice anything either. I mean, he didn't say anything, so I just figured maybe I was just, you know, maybe he knew about it. Maybe it was just like a dead deer or something. But it was just, the whole situation was just eerie. I felt really weird and uncomfortable, and I wanted to get out of there. And for some reason or another, and I can't explain why, I decided to make a deal on the car, even though I didn't really even want the car. And yeah, I drove home that 6-hour drive home, I was really pissed off at myself. I was pretty disappointed. So we had agreed that Mike would deliver me the car later that summer. And like at the end of summer in August, I think. August or September. I don't quite remember exactly when it was. And he made good on his on his promise, and he brought the car home to me, and that's kind of when the weird things started happening. So the first thing I did when I got the car home is I tried to call the previous owner, or the guy who owned the car before Mike, and see if he had a title. The dude was really angry that I had called him. I don't know if I would, you know, like called him at a bad time or something, but first of all, he didn't want to give me the title. He told me it was a salvage title and it wasn't even in his name. So I asked him whose name or who the owner actually was, and he said it doesn't matter. The guy's not around anymore. And I was like, what do you mean he's not around anymore? So that's when he cut me off and he told me, listen, the car is no good, not even for a parts car, and I should get rid of it. I tried to ask him what he meant by that, and he says, listen, I can't help you with the title. You're wasting my time, and he hung up on me. A few months later, my friend and I were looking, you know, to fix the car up, and we started taking the fenders off. We were planning on patching up the fenders. There was rust all the way down. It had the typical Studebaker rust spots right before the doors on the fenders. So anyways, we're pulling the fenders off so we could fix them. And that's when we noticed something a little peculiar about the car. It looked as if the engine was kind of sitting at an angle. And so we started looking at it a little bit closer, and we discovered that the frame was actually bent. So I started looking at it a little bit more, and it looked like the car was actually even hit in the rear at some time also. I'm not sure if it was during the same time that it was hit in the front. So the haunting started shortly after my dad and I started working on the car. So the first thing I noticed, which was really odd, is that the car sometimes, and it still does this, it'll make a ticking noise. Kind of like when an engine's cooling down. And this ticking noise will happen just at random times. It's not constant. And it's not predictable either. Like sometimes I hear it during the day, sometimes I hear it during the night. It happens whenever it feels like happening. At first, when it started doing that, when it started making the noises, I thought it had something to do with the car sitting outside, because it was sitting outside in the sun quite a bit. And I thought, well, maybe it was just heat expanding metal and contracting it or something like that. And maybe that's what the ticking noise was coming from. Well, the odd thing is it never quit. And sometimes it would happen at night when it was really cold, and sometimes it would happen during the day when it was really hot. And it continued even when we moved it into a garage. And still, to this day, it makes that weird ticking noise. Not all the time, but every once in a while. Another weird thing is I started finding dead birds in this car. It was odd because they were always robins, and I'd always find them on the passenger side, usually on the floor over here, although I did find one inside the door when this panel wasn't on there. Now you can see there's holes in the floor. I'm not sure how well this is showing up, but there's holes in the floor, but nothing's big enough for a robin to get through. Also, this window originally was broken out, and I had all the windows up. The first time I noticed a robin, this window was broken out, all the windows were up, and immediately I thought, well, obviously it flew in through here, couldn't get out because all the other windows were up, and died. Well, so then I put a piece of cardboard over here, taped it up real good, rolled all the windows up, and I still found a dead robin down there. This happened probably about 5 times in total, and one time it happened while the car was parked inside of a garage. I think one of the stranger things that had happened was when I got the car, it wouldn't start because the starter was froze up. And so my dad and I, we put the car up on jack stands. We had the starter rebuilt, and we're putting it back in. Now, the way the car was up on jack stands, the front tires were off the ground, but the back tires were still on the ground, and they were kind of sitting behind the driveway in the dirt. After we got the starter in, my dad told me, go ahead and start it. So I got in the car, I pushed in the clutch, I made sure the car was in neutral. It was a 3-speed on the tree at the time, and I made damn sure the car was in neutral. I turned the key, and the car launched off those jack stands and probably landed about here, which is approximately 6 feet away from where it was. My dad was standing right here. The car literally was within inches of touching his legs. Now, my dad immediately started yelling at me like, what the hell are you doing? You dumbass, you left the car in gear, or you didn't hold in the clutch. And I was like, I did, I had the clutch held in, and I had the thing in neutral. I don't know how it did that. Well, we finally came to the agreement that we, even though both of us thought it was extremely strange and this probably wasn't the actual culprit, which it turned out it wasn't anyway, but we came to the agreement that maybe the clutch and the flywheel were rusted together. But there is no way in heck that a starter in a battery, even with the flywheel clutch, or the flywheel and clutch rusted together, no way in heck a battery and a starter would launch a car off the stands like that. In fact, where the back tires were sitting in the dirt, you could see a peel out mark. Remember how I mentioned that smell of decay earlier? Probably about a week after I got the car home, that smell came back. So it wasn't a dead animal after all. It was coming from the car. On occasion, this thing will start to stink, and it stinks pretty bad, but it doesn't ever stay very long. Sometimes it's just as little as, like, you smell it and then it's gone. Other times it might stay like hours. Like I said before, it has this smell of like rust and like decaying rust. I'm not sure if you guys have actually ever smelled that smell before, but it smells like decaying rust, and it smells like a dead animal or something. It's really putrid. Luckily, it hasn't done that very often. I gotta step out a little bit. The exhaust fumes are really getting to me. So I think one of the weirdest events that had happened since I've owned this thing was years ago, when I probably only had this thing for about, 4 months or so. The car still didn't run. My dad and I could not get the damn thing to start. This one day, I came home from work. It was probably around 6 a.m. I worked the night shift at the time, so I worked 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. And around 6 a.m., pretty much all the neighbors and stuff were getting up and heading out for work. And the neighbor behind my house, he was getting up, and he saw me exit my car and park it, and he came storming across the alley and into my yard and just immediately started yelling at me about running this car in the middle of the night. I had no idea what the hell he was talking about, and I immediately, started yelling back, "What the hell are you on, man? The car doesn't even run." And he told me, "If you run it again, if I hear it one more time, I'm calling the damn police on you." And I continued to tell him, the car doesn't run. I don't know how you're hearing it run when it doesn't run. So I just left it as is. I thought, well, the guy's loony. He's obviously hearing somebody else's car. So I just kind of left it at that and, went to sleep. Well, probably 2 or 3 days later, we actually had a police officer come to my parents' house to discuss with us the noise at night from this car. He said that my neighbor called the cops on me because I kept revving up the engine to this car without a muffler on at night. And like I said, the car didn't even run. I had to show the police officer the car, which at that time was like taken apart practically. It had no front clip on it. It was obvious it didn't run. It was just, there's no battery in it. It looked like a junker. So the police officer, he kind of just told us, well, he's been calling the police on other people as well for other things, and he's kind of a regular for calling the police. So the police officer kind of just let it go and said, we're just going to ignore his calls from here on. And I never heard from him again. Fast forward to about 2015, I think it was. I had this car stored in a different place at the time. It was stored up north, close to my mom's place. It was actually in my brother's garage. I had a friend come over, and we were going to try to get the thing to start. I had previously swapped the engine to one that I thought would run, as the one that was in it, which was the 259 V8, was locked up for some reason. And it's really odd because when we pulled the 259 out, it wasn't locked up anymore. In fact, I since returned the 259 to the car and put the supercharger on it. Anyways, I digress. So we went and we tried to start it, and it wouldn't start, and it was acting like the starter solenoid was bad. So we started looking in the garage for a different starter solenoid. And all three of us were looking, and all three of us had our backs turned towards the car, and then suddenly the car started up by itself. And I immediately turned around and ran towards the car and grabbed the positive battery terminal and pulled it up. My wife was there to witness it, and a good friend of mine was also there to witness it. Scared the crap out of all three of us. Later, a bunch of guys showed up, and they were questioning about the car. And this is right after the event happened. And and one other thing, we were actually filming that day. And of course, it was after I turned the camera off that it did this.
Now, when that thing came back to life, did you leave the key in it?
Key was in it, yeah, but it was clicked to the middle position. Which is not start.
Maybe it's metal.
I know.
Start, you have to go like this,
Yeah, that's the disturbing part. It has to go that way to start.
Exactly.
No one was in the car.
No one was in the car. It just started by itself.
It wasn't the wind. 10 minutes ago, this thing scared the crap out of us. It started on its own.
It did?
Yeah, it did. It was just sitting here. We were looking for a
There's a damn ghost in here.
Here's a solenoid, like the solenoid's bad, right?
This will be a bad motherfucker.
So we walk away and the damn thing started up.
Dang, it loaded my pants. It's like this car's possessed by the devil. There was no one in there and it just fired right up.
It fired right up.
So if you've watched my first video, then you know about the apparition that was in the window of this car. I've gotten numerous questions about it and people commenting on what they think it is. And I'm hoping to answer some of your questions or not answer to your questions, because I really can't tell you what the hell that was. I don't know. What I do know is that day when we were working on the car, that was the day that we swapped the 259 for a 289. We had pushed the car out of the garage for the first time in like 14 or 15 years. And I just took some pictures of it. I have other pictures that I took the same day. In fact, the first picture that I show where it looks like there's something, like a smiley face or something in the dusty back window, that was taken the exact same day that the other picture was where the apparition actually shows. I'll try to dig up some more pictures of the same day and post them on here. But I didn't see anything when I took the picture. Nothing showed up in the camera. I didn't hear anything. Nothing weird happened that day. We were just in a mad rush to get done because it was hotter than hell out. And honestly, we just wanted to get done so we can run to the bar and have a beer. Another strange thing was when my wife and we bought our first house, and we had this car parked in the garage there. So I wasn't really actively working on the car, but I started noticing that the lights in the garage were turning on by themselves. So, and this happened like maybe 3 or 4 times, even though the garage was locked up and secure. And so I decided, well, I'm going to put a camera in the car. At first I had the camera set up behind the car, facing inward, and then I had the camera in the car. And I kept trying to record things and see if I could catch someone trying to break into the garage, or maybe something else was happening. And I wasn't catching anything. This one day, though, and it was a cold day, I decided to set up the camera again. And what I did is I ended up putting it on the package tray back here. And I had it facing forward towards the front of the car. And I hit record and I go in the house. And I let it run for like maybe an hour or so. And I come back out and the camera was facing back out the rear window. Like it turned 180 degrees on its own. And that scared the crap out of me. When I saw that, I immediately grabbed the camera. I run into the house. I take the SD card out. And I put it into my computer. And I start watching the video. And the stupid camera cut out right before anything happened. So I don't even know what turned the camera. But it's things like that. It's so frustrating trying to prove anything that happens with this car to other people, because it plays jokes, or it plays games with me. So another time, and this just actually happened recently, I was underneath the car. I was putting in a new drive shaft. I just had swapped over the engine and the transmission to 259 and the 4-speed that you see right there. And so I had to take the 2-piece drive shaft out put a single piece drive shaft in. My wife was out here. She was handing me tools. I had the car all up on jack stands, and let me tell you, I hate crawling underneath this thing. I actually despise crawling underneath this thing. I'll have way more jack stands than you need just to make sure it doesn't fall on me or launch or whatever the hell it does. So I was underneath here, my legs sticking out, and suddenly I felt this pressure on my neck, like somebody was strangling me, and it got tighter and I couldn't breathe, and I started kind of screaming as best as I could. My wife heard me. She comes rushing over. I crawl out as fast as I could from underneath the car. I still couldn't breathe, and my neck is just hurting really bad, like how it would feel if you were being strangled. So I run up, I run into the house. I'm trying to catch breath. I start being able to breathe again, and now my throat just hurts. It feels like it's on fire. My wife is like, "What's going on? What's going on? What's going on?" I tried to drink some water. I tried to speak, and it wasn't coming out. It took a little bit before I got my voice back. And I'm like, "I don't know what's going on." And she's like, "Well, we need to go to urgent care right now." So we pile in the car, not this car, of course, and we drove to urgent care. And the doctor had a look at me. He took x-rays. He saw inflammation in my neck. He saw swelling around the front part of my neck. And he even said, "It looks like you were being choked." But there was nothing on my skin to indicate that. Usually you would have like a red mark or something around your throat if you're actually being choked. So, and I told him that's what it felt like. And he didn't really know what to say. So he gave me some medicine for my throat, just some lutegens or whatever you call those. And pretty much sent me home. But I probably, after that, I didn't touch this car for another month or so. So the other strange thing that happens with this car, and it happens quite a bit, it sometimes will accelerate on its own. No idea how or why it's doing that. And you guys probably think I'm crazy, but I'm not. This actually happens. So it revs up by itself, it throttles by itself, and also puts on the brakes by itself. One time I was driving with my wife, and we're heading back from the grocery store, and we're actually taking Evil Stew. And I was making a right turn, and all suddenly the car just hammered itself around the corner, and it started accelerating. And I looked behind me, and some lady had ran a red light and flew through the intersection. If the car hadn't have given itself gas like that, I would have been hit for sure. So I can't say that everything about this car is evil or bad intentions, because that actually saved us both. So I just want to show you guys some of the damage that I found on the car. When I bought this car, these grills were busted out, like these surround pieces. They were completely destroyed on both sides. The middle grill was destroyed. There's an air valance underneath. It's kind of hard to see because it's dark. But that was actually bashed up and just totally twisted up and destroyed. I ended up putting all those parts on. This hood is not original to the car. That came off of a 57 Golden Hawk. The grill's new. For some reason, and I'm not sure why, but I have a hard time keeping headlights on this side. Like, the first few of them burnt out, and now this one cracked. You can see it cracking up and down here, or across like that and then down. And so I have a feeling this one won't be in there for too much longer either. This fender on this side had been replaced. That's not the original fender. So down here, right in front of the steering arm, or the steering box, there's a crease in the frame. That's actually where the frame was bent upwards. The bumper brackets were changed at some point to try to straighten the front end out because of the frame being bent. Let's see, the hood. The original hood I took off, but it was on the inside of the hood, it was all bashed up. I'm not sure if the original hood was actually the original hood to the car. So in the trunk, you can see that it was hit over here some, you know, in this corner. This is all Bondo. You can see right there where those marks are. That's really thick Bondo running all the way up and across the top there. You can see these are all buckled in almost as though the hood, or right here, this part is bent inward, almost like the whole hood, or not the hood, but the trunk lid was pushed forward. Not sure what that hole is for, or how that got in there. It has these weird, you know, strange bent marks in this trunk, and I'm not sure where those came from or how they came about. I'm not even sure if this is the original trunk lid to the car. As you can see, they try to crudely repair this lip here, and that there's actually a piece that is supposed to go right here between the bumper and the body, but that's missing. Behind this you can see right here where there's a ton of Bondo, but behind this fender here, the quarter panel, there's a lot of dents in the actual body behind it. These quarter panels come off. They literally unbolt. You can see where this fin was actually off at one point. That's where the original bolts would have been. And somebody put pop rivets and shit in there trying to hold it in place. So there was a lot of repair done to this side of the car in the rear. Now originally this car had a bench seat and a 3-speed on the tree, but I put these buckets in because the seat was totaled when I got it. But right here, there's this big indentation right above the steering wheel. I'm pretty sure that's from someone's head. So I don't know if the car went into a ditch really hard. Maybe the guy bounced up and smashed his head against here. And it's pretty severe. I mean, if you look at this side, how much of a gap there is between this part and there, compared to this side, where there isn't a gap at all. So someone really hit their head hard on here. When I bought the car, it didn't have a headliner, and it had house carpet in it. So I've owned this car for 21 years, and I tell you, I have a lot of stories. I can't really go over every single thing because, I mean, that would take hours and hours, and really I want to keep this video at a manageable length. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. It was kind of rushed. I had other ideas that I wanted to do for this video to make it a little bit more spooky or whatever, but I don't know. I just don't have a lot of time lately, so I just did what I could. So maybe in the future I'll make more videos about the strange events and occurrences that took place after taking ownership of this car, and maybe you guys want to tune in for that stuff. Let me know in the comments below if that's something you guys are interested in. Yeah, in the meantime, enjoy your Halloween. Take care, guys.